Lycopodium is an interesting material. It's a club moss, which is a trailing evergreen. Belongs to the family Cryptogamin, which includes ferns and mosses that are propagated by spores. The remedy is prepared from the spores. Now, what's quite interesting, the spores are shaped like a wolf's paw, which is the origin of the Greek name Lyco, and podos, which means foot. So Lycopodium, wolf's foot. It is actually one of the oldest surviving plant life forms on Earth. It has existed since the Silurian period, which is some 350 million years ago. It's quite extraordinary. What's extraordinary is that it survived virtually unchanged, despite all the intervening geological and climatic cataclysms and upheavals. That is to say, it has an adaptable and somewhat indestructible nature. It fits into varying environments without itself mutating in the process, which is, again, very interesting. So, the plant was used as a whole in ancient times as a tonic and a diuretic. Now, interestingly enough, for our purposes, the spore from which the remedy is made was considered completely inert until the advent of the microscope, which demonstrated that the spores are minute tetrahedral cones containing an oily substance which actually has a very definite drug action. So as long as the spores remain intact, they used actually the spores in the 17th, 18th century as a powder base for putting together other medicinal substances, and they began to notice that some people would get a very severe rash. And that would be when the pores got somehow crushed, this oily substance would come out and cause this rash. But as long as the pores are intact, the powder is quite bland and non-irritating. And Hahnemann, for some reason known only to himself, triturated the spores, releasing the active oils, and made provings, recording over 1,000 symptoms. So, as we seek correspondences between the plant and the person that we are giving the remedy to, the persona of the Lycopodium and the persona of the spore, the persona of the Lycopodium can have a very different appearance from their true inner state. Furthermore, their nature is very viable, very adaptable. The mentality is very complex. It's not always easy to recognize and define. The appearance, the way they manifest in an interview has often very little in common with what's transpired underneath. So what we're going to do is train our microscopes, our perception, and understand the tension that arises out of this dichotomy, this contradiction, this split between the inner and the outer, that is what is the core of the Lycopodium. This is one of the remedies that exemplifies the split between the inner and the outer.
We're going to speak about the magnesias. And the magnesias are some of the most important and common remedies in homeopathic practice. And why I call them the magnesias as opposed to calling it magnesia muriatica and magnesia carbonica is that these remedies run so close that sometimes it's very difficult to differentiate between the two groups. These are definitely the two largest of the class. So let's talk about what is general to magnesias first, and then once we get the general concept of magnesia down, then we'll try to refine it to which of the specific salts should be considered in an individual case. Generally, the root for magnesia has to do with power, and also has to do with mother, Ma. Magnesia is the 8th most common element in the Earth's crust. Magnesium is a highly reactive substance. It's a metal. Metallurgically, a metal is something that has a shiny, reflective surface. It can be hammered. It transmits heat in certain ways and so forth. Metallurgically, magnesium is not really a metal because it doesn't exist by itself in the world in almost any circumstance because it's so highly reactive. It reacts to oxygen and creates oxidized salts. It reacts with any sort of salt water and creates magnesium salts and so forth. So it virtually doesn't exist because of its high reactivity. In other words, you could say it's a substance that needs to be in relationship with other elements. It doesn't stand alone. It's so highly reactive, in fact, that it's almost explosive. And in fact, it was used, because of that, it was used in fireworks. And it's still used largely in photographic processes because of its reactivity. It's found mostly in relationship with calcium. And calcium is one of the easiest substances to confuse for magnesium homeopathically.